Three, two, one, action.
Well, let me tell you something, brother.
Welcome to the very, very first episode of the Wrestling in Film podcast. Yes, I did just use two verys. I don't know why, but we're gonna hear random stuff like that on this podcast. I apologize. But no, thank you so much for joining me on this very first edition of my Wrestling in Film podcast. As I said in the trailer, I've had the pleasure of doing various written pieces, such as reviews on high-profile wrestling films like Fighting with My Family. I had the pleasure of interviewing the Dark Side of the Ring filmmakers, various documentary filmmakers that have obviously delved into the world of professional wrestling, and obviously contributing a lot of wonderful features to recent Film Hounds magazine issues that delve within the wrestling in film bubble. So, like I said in the trailer, I'm now ready to spew. I'm ready to take this deeper in podcast form. And I think that was one of the reasons that really excited me about this. And you will hear a podcast every other Sunday, so a bi-weekly podcast delving into various wrestling and film related matters. Today, we're going to kick it off with a bang with my mini A&E WWE Legends interview series, where I interview the filmmakers behind certain episodes of the most recent WWE Legends series on A&E. And today I kick it off with a bang with Kory Kozak, who is an acclaimed sports filmmaker. He's made wonderful documentaries in the past, such as Survivor, The Finish Line, which is a film I particularly enjoyed about a group of runners. Tiger Slam, the documentary documenting Tiger Woods' incredible victories, and Dunblane, which is a little short documentary about Andy Murray's hometown. So really, really well versed and acclaimed filmmaker, someone who's won 12 Emmy awards. So not every day you get to speak to a guy who's won 12 Emmy awards. So not only for that reason was it exciting to speak to Kory, but obviously he directed the very first episode of this season of WWE Legends, and that was on the Undertaker. And it was fascinating to hear his mindset, his approach coming into it, as he was maybe not necessarily a wrestling fan, but he was a fan at one point, like many people have been, and then he drifted away, and then he's all these years later he's come back and he's making a documentary about one of the most celebrated and iconic names in the industry. And I'll be honest, prior to even interviewing Kory, prior to obviously even watching the documentary about the Undertaker on A&E, I was skeptical, to be honest, because not long ago we had the Last Ride series on the WWE Network on the Undertaker, and I thought that was such a wonderful insight into the mind of the Undertaker, and it gave us so much. And it was 5 episodes, and there was bonus episodes. And since then, Undertaker's done a lot of interviews, a lot of did the Hall of Fame induction. So he's opened the doors a lot. So and we've found out a lot about the Undertaker. So my first impression was, what are we going to find out in this documentary that we don't know in the last 2-3 years? So I felt it was a bit of a, I understand why you would do it on the Undertaker, big name attraction, of course, but I felt like it was whoever the director was, I didn't know it was Kory at the time, was almost handcuffed because I didn't think you could do much more. So going in, I had that mindset, but when I watched it, I was actually really taken aback, and I was really, really, really impressed, because not only do we go into his personal life on such a deeper level that we've never gone into before, that stories we've never heard of Mark Calaway, the Undertaker, to my knowledge at least. And and we get incredible insights from his family members, such as his mother, who we get a really intimate look into as she speaks and talks with Mark in the documentary. So I was so impressed with that. And then they give us the wrestling stuff, but just enough because that's stuff we all know. But more importantly, we get behind the man. We get behind the character of the Undertaker. We get to see the man, Mark Calaway. It's such a beautiful and really touching documentary. And I advise anybody who hasn't seen it to go check it out because Kory did a masterful job. So having watched it and then going into this interview with Kory, I was so excited to see his mindset, how things came about, and how he really delved deeper and into the man that is Mark Calaway. So I really hope you enjoy this interview as much as I enjoyed conducting it. Kory is a wonderful guest and just really open, and it was such a wonderful chat. So here is my chat, my interview with Kory Kozak on The Undertaker, WWE Legends episode. My knowledge, I've never spoken to a 12-time Emmy Award winner. So, so I mean, congratulations on that, and thank you for
Thank
allowing
you.
me the opportunity.
Appreciate
Obviously, I wanted to talk about the Undertaker's film. You're very much immersed in like the sports world. I mean, I'm looking at the films that you've done. Some really like awesome stuff, by the way. Survivor, The Finish Line, the Andy Murray one. I think Dunblane, I think it was called. Like, I really enjoyed that too. Um, so you like I said, like your sensibilities are very much aligned to this type of story, which was about the human side of the Undertaker, about Mark Calaway. So when when it came to you though, what was your reaction? Like, what did the Undertaker mean to you? Because to my knowledge, I'm not sure if you're how familiar you were with professional wrestling, and like what does that mean to you when they said, "Hey, we want you to do a documentary about the Undertaker"?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I was a huge wrestling fan as a kid, up to probably about like through college, right?
Hmm.
Then kind of died off a little bit, hung in there a little bit through like NWO, a little, at the beginning of that, and then I kind of went away for a while. So when they told me, like, when they offered the show to me, I was like, wait a second, that's the same guy? Like he's still going, he's still going. I really didn't know. I was like, oh my God. And because I loved him when he first came out. I remember his initial appearance on TV.
Hmm.
I remember that moment. I remember all that, and I just what a great character he was right out of the gate. So for me, that was exciting, and I was like, wow. And then I dug into his things, and I was like, wow. I mean, he's been doing this for so long, and at such a high level, and the fan following is amazing with him and all that. So it was when I really started thinking about it, I was like, this is an amazing opportunity, and what a great character to do a show on.
Yeah, it was. I mean, like he's one of those that's very rare in the sense he's crossed over like few wrestlers have ever have. Like, because I can say the Undertaker to someone who really has no idea about wrestling, and they're like, "Oh, yeah,
For
I know
sure.
him."
Yeah,
Like,
sure. I mean, and it's unique because he's so unique, right? I mean, he's a character without a doubt. Like it is a created thing, and it stuck, and he just was. I think it was such a perfect blend of everything with him. Uh, you know, Massive human being, has a great demeanor. He hadn't been really tapped into yet, when he got the character, and to be able to pull that off, and there's some acting ability there, right?
yeah,
There's athletic ability that has to be there. And then you have to make that character just grow constantly and change it and be willing to take those chances. And I think that's what made that character last so long. I think that's why people know who he is
mm,
when you mention him. I mean, I think there's probably a handful of wrestlers, Andre the Giant, Hulk Hogan, probably Flair, and then you get to kind of like Undertaker's kind of right there. You know what I mean?
yeah,
He's in that group. It's amazing in terms of recognizable names and things like that. It's really remarkable.
yeah, absolutely. And what I watched an interview of yours a few days ago, and you said something that was really interesting because obviously primarily you're doing it on sports people some people who aren't that well known, shall we say. And you
Mhm.
said I try to present them almost as movie stars, like with the power of filmmaking, you kind of gloss them up, if you will. Whereas, but you're kind of doing a contrast in this biography, right? Because you're now talking about someone who has been glossed up, who has been glamorized for 30
Right.
plus years, but we don't know the real guy. So you're actually doing the opposite, where you're trying to pull back and not
Correct. So
glamorize.
we're having to strip him down, right? And
Yeah.
get down to who Mark Calaway is, and get beyond the Undertaker. Who was this guy that became the Undertaker, and then who was the guy behind the character all those years? Yeah. So it was totally different.
Like
And that
what was that like for you? Like to have that approach in mind?
yeah, it was, it all kind of comes down to the root is always what's the best story, right? And for what I do, it's always about storytelling and what you're gonna uh what's gonna come across the best to the viewer, and what do they need? There are a couple things in we had to think about. One is the A&E audience is different than a standard WWE audience, right?
Yeah.
Like we can't just go and like in Edge's show, we have to get into the ladder matches, right?
Yeah.
So somebody saying at home, what's a ladder match? You have to actually kind of explain it to get to that section a little bit.
Yeah.
It hurts the section a little bit, but you got to do it, or else they have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So you had to figure out what's going to grab those people, and I think the personal side really grabs everybody,
Hmm.
and a bit of storytelling. So yeah, it was different having a character that's been, we haven't really gotten to know Mark until, they did a great job with Last Ride.
Yeah.
They
But
did a great job,
but
with all these things. But it was like, so my challenge really was, we've just kind of seen him in Last Ride. What haven't we seen that's in Last Ride, and what can I kind of get to,
hmm.
And for me, that was like getting to his early years, his basketball as much as I could, um, get into his family, and that part of it. Talk about the early years of really kind of scraping by and figuring it out. The South Africa trip I thought that was something I hadn't seen
Yeah,
before.
me neither.
Great. So that's the kind of stuff I was like, we have to get to this stuff in order to get to the other stuff that people know better.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that was one of my questions that I had because I was curious as someone who kind of watches all this stuff. Like I tried to as much as I can, of course. And then obviously the last ride so fresh in my mind. It was so good.
Mhm.
But so I was kind of curious myself. I was actually what can they tell me now that actually
Right,
I don't
right.
know it in the last 2 years or whatnot. And like I said, you have done that so well. I was so impressed because you go, let's say if we cut out commercials, the documentary is about an hour 25, I think.
Right,
And
correct.
it's about 40 minutes before you get to WWE.
Right.
Like that in itself is kind of explains how deep you go into before
We
the human being.
What's funny is the initial cut we had, our rough cut was even later. Because I was
Oh,
like, we had like an extra, I think it was an extra act of the show. So we the initial, because I was like, well, let's give them everything we can that people don't know.
hmm,
So we really expanded on the South Africa trip. We really expanded on college basketball,
hmm,
got into recruiting a little bit more. I mean, that was one part that was a little hard because he had such a bizarre college stretch because he literally went to like 4 different schools in 3 years or something like that,
yeah,
or 4 years. So it was really like a school a year for different circumstances. It was crazy. So trying to get that across. South Africa, we had the entire act built out. Problem again was for both those was footage. Like we just couldn't get, he's pre footage for every college basketball game, not by much, but just by a couple years where everything's on. Somebody's got it recorded somewhere,
yeah.
And
Also,
then
he was just before like VHS or something like that.
yeah, where people were always recording everything,
Yeah.
it just wasn't how it was then. And then similar with South Africa, we could find some things, but it was really hard to find his footage, and we couldn't find the like the riot scene, so we had to cut that down a little bit because that story is incredible from him,
Hmm.
and you can't imagine like a 23-year-old kid, trying to figure this whole thing
Yeah.
out in South Africa, trying to be a pro wrestler, and you got riot going on. So all that stuff kind of we had to bring it down a little bit. And then it was easy to expand on, on Kane a little bit more and
Yeah.
to get into that, the Brothers of Destruction, get into Hell in a Cell with Foley. All that stuff was a lot. We knew we could do that,
Yeah.
and that was always going to be there, but we tried to give as much as we could of that backstory.
Yeah, and I think to be fair, I think even the wrestling fans will. I hope they will appreciate that because I definitely did because you don't want a rehash because we've
Right,
seen that a lot of times.
right.
You want the new stuff, and to me that this was all fascinating, like things that are. And when it came to like some of the earlier stuff, it's really interesting to see how much it still actually parallels what came later and like the
Right. Yeah.
glimpses of like the setups that we're like, oh, this was in him all along, like he was destined to do this.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, even just the, South Africa promo picture he took in a graveyard,
Yeah.
which nobody knew that. Steve Simpson told us, I think, during the interview, actually, he remembered and he was like, yeah, I think he took a picture for his promos by the graveyard. He's like, what was he doing? He's like, there's nobody asked him to do that.
Yeah.
It was like always kind of meant to be for him. So yeah, it's pretty crazy, his career.
And the thing that I feel makes this completely different to everything else that's ever been done on Undertaker, and it makes it more human and gives us Mark Calaway at his purest, is the stuff with the mum. Like I adore those scenes. They're brilliant. Was that always a thing that you had? Like I don't know if since day one of the project, but like very early on, like we've got to get like Mrs. Calaway. Like
We really wanted to get her, and Mark was not like Mark was very open about everything. His mom, he was always like, let's see. I mean, it was kind of like, if we can do it, we'll do it. And I think we hit it off pretty well. I think overall, he's a great guy. He's very easygoing.
yeah,
But at the same time, there's a guy, his whole career has been so guarded. So to earn his trust, that first, that we know what we're doing. Second, that we're not out there to make anybody look bad with this thing. This is his biography. The last thing we want is to anybody in his family or anything to look bad. So we wouldn't show that anyway.
yeah,
To be honest, but even though she comes off great,
yeah,
but he was worried. He was. She hadn't done anything. You know, you get a glimpse of what she was like. Younger. I mean, she was a pretty. She would kind of do whatever. I mean, she's
yeah.
jumping out of the stands to go fight for her son. And he said that he was like, she would say things to some of the guys when they'd be in Houston wrestling, and he'd bring them over to have dinner, and she'd fire stuff out at him sometimes, and he's like, "Oh my God, what do you say?" So it was funny because when we finally got him to agree, and it wasn't like a huge debate, but it was making sure that he was good with it and
Yeah.
felt comfortable with it. Michelle, the whole family was good with it, and we wanted to make sure that was all good. And we went, and initially I was going to interview her separately myself.
Yeah,
And
that's what I was going to ask. Like,
right.
was
So
that a
that was the
strategic
plan.
thing? Like,
Yeah. So she and Mark start talking when we're there, and her hearing's not great. And so she gets better as it's going. So, but I didn't know. So we're kind of there, and she's having trouble. We're not really getting much back and forth with her, just talking, as we're setting up and stuff. So I'm like, Mark, why don't you sit down? I want to get some shots of them anyway in the kitchen together and stuff like that. And then it just kind of became, they start talking a little bit, and I'd throw out a topic for him and he would tear up, and that's where, these guys are amazing because you give Edge or Mark Undertaker a thing, and they can just run with it. That's what
yeah,
they've been doing their whole career. So I'd say, how about this? And Mark would kind of find a way to kind of put into his own words. And then his mom was doing a good job, and they were just having a nice little talk. And then she's warming up, and she's definitely kind of way more into it. And so I was like, well, let's just go through it, Mark. Let's just do this. You guys just kind of go back and forth. I think it's gonna be better.
Yeah.
And you got some great moments, and she's such a character and super nice. And the funny thing is, we finish and we get that done, and it goes very well. And it didn't start off that great. Mark was very worried at first, and I'm like, it'll be fine. We'll keep going. It ended up being really fun, and we finished as we're kind of breaking down our crew. She like I wish we were still rolling because she didn't stop talking like the entire time. She was awesome. She's telling more stories, and I'm kind of like, where was that like 10 minutes ago? But she was amazing though. She was really cool. We
It
actually had
proves the best stuff's not scripted. It just comes out.
yeah, and that really was that case, the case of that. And Mark had to drive all the way from Austin to Houston that morning. So it was cool that he did that for us, and we appreciate it. So yeah, and he was, Mark was so committed to everything we were doing, which I think really the last ride helped with that too, because he saw
Yeah.
how that worked out for him. And obviously that was, a project over years,
Yeah.
Um,
It was about 3 years, I believe.
yeah, and so that actually kind of warmed him up for us as to, okay, this is what we need to do to get this done. And sometimes it takes a long time just to
Yeah.
get a little bit, and I think he's kind of gotten that
Yeah.
now, you know what I mean? And he actually he was a big help with us getting Adam Copeland interested in doing the show.
Sorry, you're saying so? Yeah, Undertaker helped get Edge on board as well. You were saying, sorry.
Yeah, it was awesome, so that was really helpful. And just being able to talk to him and be like, hey, this is gonna be great for you 20 years down the road. You have your life documented. I mean, who has that?
Hmm.
It's a good point. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. One of the things, obviously, you talked about getting to the WWE stuff, but really spending time on beforehand. What made you decide what things within his WWE career to touch on? Because obviously this story is more about Mark than it is Undertaker. So how
Mhm.
did you sift through 30 years of a career to be like, okay, we're going to talk about this, and this really quickly, and squeeze it in there somehow?
Yeah, that was to me, that was the scariest part about doing this, because I know how hardcore his fans are, and I know how hardcore WWE and wrestling fans are. They know everything,
Mm.
and you didn't want to miss anything, but you also know you can't have everything in there. It's a 30-year career. You just can't do it. So we kind of went through everything, and I talked actually to WWE about it, and the folks were working with it and that, and I was like, all right, here's my list of things. This is where I think I'm going. These seem to be kind of pinnacle moments for him, and things that everybody, like Hell in a Cell. I think Mark says it in the show. Somebody asks him at least once a week. Somebody asks him almost every day. That, and whether Kane's his brother in real life. So that kind of was like, all right, you know what? And that's to me, I remember that match, and then just being like, whoa, this is crazy,
Yeah.
and it was such a game changer match, and it just was wild, for a lot of reasons,
Yeah.
and so that there, and then trying to figure out how to do the Kane section with out just doing it, a play by play, just kind of telling their overall story. We knew we had to do that. Initially, that was actually shorter, and we actually expanded it because I know, a lot of people know that, what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's, how do we do this without it being just too much, and things that of a rehash, so that
Yeah.
was, you know we got there, I think, in the end, but that was tricky. And then figuring out how to, his last match initially we had in there, but it's such a strange circumstances, COVID's going on. They did it, remotely. There's no fans. It looks cool and very
Yeah.
cinematic, but it didn't have that whole vibe. So that actually we basically cut down to just some shots and just
Yeah.
kind of there. But yeah, it was definitely a process, and we were really worried about, you know, should we have more about him beating Hogan to win the championship? Should we have more things like that? And you just get to a point where it's like you have to pick and choose. We'll show it, but we can't really just break it down, you know?
Yeah, yeah. No, and I think the like whether consciously or like and like without knowing you, the things you've picked again align really well with the story because they relate back to the man so well. Because Kane really talks
Right.
about how
Right.
Mark Calaway helped him so much. The man like was so instrumental to him. In the Hell in a Cell match, you see I miss Mark Calaway switch on to be like, check on him. How is he feeling? How's he doing?
Right. Right.
Like, but while still trying to be in the mode of the Undertaker. So I
Yeah.
think in that aspect, you really it translates really well to like the story.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. And yeah, that is good. I'm glad you got that out of the Hell in a Cell because Mark, he's talked about it, but to talk beyond just like what happened, it's really hard for him because it was he didn't really want to do it, the way
Yeah,
it came out.
going on the top.
Yeah, I mean, that was not what he wanted to do. He was terrified that, if Mick misses that table by a foot or lands a foot shorter or longer, I mean, he's in a lot of pain and maybe dead.
Yeah,
And he was aware, and it took them weeks to kind of talk him into it,
yeah.
and
I think that's the besides the some of the comments from his mother, the line where Mick Foley imitates Undertaker and he's like Mick, why are you so hell bent on killing yourself? Is maybe the funniest
right,
line in the documentary.
crazy, right? I mean, and getting to know Mark now, I could hear him say it and just being like shaking his head at him like over and over again. And eventually, just like, all right, let's do it, and I do think there is a little more. Foley claims that he lied right before the match, the day of the match, that he had actually gone on top of the cage and felt good about it. And he didn't say he tested it out, but he claimed that he'd gone up there and he'd never gone up there. And, he just knew, Mick just knew what he wanted to do
Yeah.
and knew they could do it. Knew Undertaker was the guy to do it with, and so that's what kind of worked for both of them.
Yeah. And one of the things I love that you do is instead of, you said that instead of focusing on that last match, your start and beginning and end is the Hall of Fame. And
Right.
that works beautifully. Again, like I said, because Undertaker said in an interview promoting the biography that that was the first time that he's actually being Mark Calaway in front of a live WWE audience. And obviously, you're in the biography, it's capturing the moments before the build up to that because there's a sense of
Right.
pressure for him because he's never done it before, being purely Mark Calaway for the WWE fans. So, what was that experience like to capture that build up and that kind of,
It was cool. I mean, here you are, when we just had kind of gotten to know each other and things like that, and now you're with a guy for a full day on maybe the biggest day of his life. I
yeah,
mean, it's just like a dream come true for him. Um, it's the first time at the whole time we dealt with him where he was nervous.
mhm,
We took the ride over with him over to the arena from the hotel, and from the moment we met him in like the green room over at the hotel, all the WrestleMania folks are there, and they're down there too. And Mark came down, and we're hanging out waiting for him. And it's the first time where he kind of stumbled a little bit and like, you can feel like shakiness in his voice, which he's always so laid back and chilled out.
cool hand Luke is how people describe him.
Yeah,
He's
for
always
sure. And he really is. He's really a chilled out guy. Like he's got a good demeanor about him. But he was trying to figure out the reason he was nervous is because he didn't know how he was going to deliver that speech.
hmm,
And his goal was to go without a prompter. Um, they had a prompter for him, but it was just basically a safety net. He didn't want to read it. So
yeah.
they actually covered it up. And then it's kind of cool. It's like a behind the curtain thing. So they covered up the prompter with a huge, plasma TV or whatever, LCD, whatever. And whenever he would walk behind the podium, that's when they knew that he needed a little help, and they
Ah,
would uncover it so he could kind of get the words and find the section he was at, and then he'd walk away and they'd cover it back up.
Oh wow.
It was pretty cool, and it worked. That's the amazing part is,
Yeah.
the guys were on point handling the prompter, and they knew, where he was, and they knew when he needed the hand, and they were paying attention. And Mark pulled it off really well. It was a great speech, and I think he got to do probably 90%, maybe 95% of what he wanted to accomplish with that speech. To talk about, Mark Calaway a lot, the people that helped make him. I know, like, some people were upset he didn't mention Mick in there, and
Oh
there are a
yeah.
couple other people. I mean, which look, I agree with that a little bit, but I don't think it wasn't intentional in any
No,
way.
no.
He just got 30-year career. He's trying to get to everybody he could,
Yeah.
and get across his message. So it
I mean,
was really
I think
cool.
Mick Foley said he didn't take it personally at all, and he said I forgot to thank my parents. So who am I to say that Undertaker actually criticized Undertaker? Sorry.
Right. I mean, of anybody to miss, Foley's probably the best guy because he doesn't care. So it's
Yeah,
he's like anything's rolling off his shoulders. So,
yeah,
but it was really neat being around him that day, uh, seeing, and we're in the room. You see some of the shots when he's kind of practicing his speech.
yeah,
So I think in some ways we were kind of comfort to him because no one's in there. He's in the Mavericks practice room.
yeah. He's in the basketball court, isn't he? Yeah,
Yeah, and there's nobody else in there. So he's got a big basketball court. There's a couple couches. There's some, just some snacks and drinks or whatever. But that's it. And Michelle's kind of popping in out. She's going to see people and stuff like that. So he's really on his own, other than us. So I think he was happy that we were there,
yeah,
and he could take a break from rehearsing here and there, just come over and just kind of chat for a while. I think if he needed a hand kind of going over a line, he could just come over to us and just kind of give it to us,
yeah,
so it was cool being there and watching him get to the point where he was comfortable and really not very nervous at all at the end. Like, he was just ready for a performance by the time he went out. So he rehearsed for like 5 hours.
Oh wow.
I mean, almost straight. He didn't go walk around. Obviously people are coming down to his room every so often, but to be honest, he was on his own doing his thing. Just he wanted to nail that speech.
Yeah,
And
and nail it, he did. And
yeah,
one of the other really, I mean, that's great as well. I mean, and like I said, I think you really subconsciously you relate to that as a viewer, like that feeling of like, oh, I've got to nail this,
right.
got to do such a great thing, and seeing Undertaker like that is is a sight, shall I say? And even the hug that he has with Vince, I mean, that's a real
Yeah.
emotional. And
That was
you can see them
uh,
trying not to cry on camera, because I think
yeah.
maybe they're aware that obviously you're behind.
Yeah, that was awesome. And that was really the first time that day he saw Vince, and then Vince came, they got together later, but and then we weren't allowed to shoot that. But I think the only reason we were able to get it is because they were just kind of bumped into each other,
Yeah,
in a
yeah,
way. So that was awesome. And then they actually stayed up after the event, and Vince has lots of stuff going on right now, but he's
yeah,
a
of course.
interesting cat for sure. So the Hall of Fame went super late that night because it was after SmackDown,
Yeah.
So it's I don't even know what time it is. So Mark goes to Vince's kind of his makeshift office or whatever, and they hung out there. Mark said until I don't know 2-3 o'clock in the morning, just having a
Mm.
couple drinks, talking. It ended because Vince had to go work out. 3 o'clock in the morning after a couple drinks, he's going to the gym. So pretty wild,
Yeah.
but I know Mark, we got to hang out with Mark the next day, and it was like everything, all the weights off his shoulders. It was cool. He's at WrestleMania. He's going to, seeing everybody at that place. So it was a totally different day for him.
Yeah. And like I said, it was a tremendous speech, and like that whole everything you captured there was just brilliant. Again, and it ties so well into the story. And one of the things I'm so fascinated to know is like because you've worked on subjects in relation to icons like Tiger Woods, Andy Murray, and various other sports stars and athletes as well who have such incredible stories. What's the commonality for you between Undertaker and these various other icons that you've had the privilege of, whose stories that you have also told.
You know, when you do, I think it always comes down to what everybody's got a story, right? I think anybody, like you can find a story with any person on the planet.
Hmm.
So getting that down to that basic level of the story, kind of pulling pulling away the curtain, in a way, and just getting to the nut of who the people are. And there's everybody, has that commonality there and that common ground. And telling their stories, instead of just making them out to be heroes and superheroes and super athletes and all that stuff. Now we need to know why they were able to do that, and why is the greatest question you can ask all the time. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar. Tom Rinaldi's a really great feature reporter.
Hmm.
He's with Fox now. He was with ESPN. We worked together at ESPN for a long time.
Yeah.
Tom's greatest gift is the ability to ask the question why, and he will have like a deep moment with somebody, and they'll give an answer, and there's this pause, and Tom will fire out why, and it always is the jackpot moment of every interview we've done. And I think why is you're always looking for that with everything, and that's where, when you're doing Tiger Woods, why was he so great? What made him so great? What was it beyond all the stuff we see all the time? What was it?
Yeah.
Andy Murray, like going to the root of all that in Dunblane, which was such a heavy, horrible moment,
Yeah.
and how that kind of made him who he was and made that town kind of, how he helped pull that town out of the darkness, and why does he care? Why was that so important to him? And that's always what you want to get to. So, with Mark, it was like, you know, why do this? It's a crazy occupation. How it's, you have a character that is a comic book kind of character, and how do you do it? And it's just such an interesting world to, the whole wrestling world is so interesting.
Mm.
Um, at the beginning of Edge, you'll see his first thing in the show is explaining what a professional wrestler or a WWE superstar is. And it's they're performers, they're athletes, they're actors, they're all this stuff, wrapped up in one. It's probably the most unique profession in entertainment there is.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, that's an incredible answer, and I will say, I mean, I also teach as well in my life, and that question of why is a huge one that I always push to my students, especially when they're writing essays and whatnot. I'm like,
Yeah,
why, why?
and they should be asking themselves that as they're doing it.
Yeah,
It's what is this all about? Like, why, why am I writing this? Why do we care about this? Why do I need to know this? And
yeah,
it's always your next layer,
yeah,
it peels another layer off the onion. You keep getting down there.
yeah. Absolutely. And Kory, I mean, just thank you so much again for your
Well,
time. I mean,
thanks.
that's, I mean, I hope this wasn't too bad for you. I thoroughly
No,
enjoyed
it's a
it.
lot of fun. Like, I could talk about this forever. It's one of my favorite projects I've ever done.
Oh wow.
I've enjoyed, Edge as well. I mean, it's been really cool. We have one coming up, that my team's doing on Kane.
Oh wow.
That'll be coming, and then there's another super surprise show we'll have after that, which I can't say yet, but it's a big one. So that'll be really good. And those are Kane and the surprise show are for 2023. So those will
Oh
be good.
wow. Oh
Edge is
amazing.
coming in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, very cheeky of me to ask, but I mean, if you wouldn't mind, when once the Edge documentary is aired, if we could do a part two of
Sure.
this, that would be amazing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's Adam's been like he's a unique guy, and
Yeah,
it's been really cool getting to know him. And just like Mark, but they're so different in their how they came up, in their who they are, the people and everything like that. They're both really nice guys, very chilled out, but they're very unique characters for sure.
yeah. Absolutely. I look forward to it very much. And like I said again, thank you so much again for your time, Kory. And I'll let you know when this comes out, and
Great.
hopefully we can arrange with the Edge one very soon
That
after.
would be awesome. I appreciate it. This has been fun.
Thank you, Kory. That was my chat with Kory Kozak. I really, really hope you all enjoyed that interview. Like I said, Kory was so open in that chat, and really kind with his time and really kind with giving a lot of great insight, particularly the story about interviewing the Undertaker's mother. I thought that was very funny and really informative, and about the process of filmmaking, and just kind of how he creatively was able to get a lot out of Undertaker's mother, obviously in a nice, respectful way as well. That Mark Calaway was happy with too. So, and also just little insights like the Hall of Fame. Undertaker not reading from a prompter, but having it there just in case he needed it. So just a lot of cool insights. And as Kory touches on, he also had a very important role in the Edge documentary. So you may or may not be hearing a second part where we discuss that wonderful documentary on Edge, which was a later episode in the WWE Legends season 2. So, but until then, stay tuned. Look forward to the next episode, and just help us out. We're just starting. Like, share, and subscribe to the Wrestling in Film podcast. I seriously do hope you enjoyed that episode, and I look forward to seeing the numbers of views for the next and future episodes. Thank you very much. Peace out, brother.